My name is Cole Mercer, and I've spent my whole life building things, my architecture firm, my reputation, my independence, all of it from nothing but sweat and stubbornness. I never needed anyone to hand me anything, and I sure didn't need Bria's family and their mountains of money to feel like I mattered. But when Bria begged me to join her and her powerful clan for a vacation in Montana, I said yes, not because I wanted to, but because I loved her enough to put up with them. Her father, Gregory Langston, was the kind of man who walked into a room and made sure everyone knew he was the richest guy there, like it was his oxygen. I didn't care about his wealth or his attitude, but I tried to play nice for Bria's sake. We were hiking through the mountains, the air crisp, and the views endless when it happened. I was distracted, talking to Bria about some cabin design I'd been sketching in my head, and my boot came down hard on Gregory's fancy Italian shoes, soft leather, probably worth more than my truck. It was an accident, a clumsy misstep on uneven ground, but you'd think I'd spit in his face from the way he reacted. His hand flew up, fast and sharp, and before I could blink, he slapped me across the cheek, right there in front of Bria, her mother Celeste, and the whole smug Langston crew. The sting wasn't just on my skin. It burned deeper, into my pride, into everything I'd built for myself. I stood there, jaw tight, blood roaring in my ears, waiting for Bria to say something, anything, to defend me. Instead, she turned to me with those cool gray eyes of hers and said, "Cole, apologize to him." Apologize? To him? For stepping on his stupid shoes by mistake? I couldn't believe it. My chest tightened, and I looked around at their faces, Gregory's smirk, Celeste's pursed lips, the cousins pretending not to watch, and I realized I was alone up there. They didn't see me as Bria's husband, as someone who'd earned his place. I was just the guy who didn't fit, the outsider who'd scuffed the king's throne. I didn't yell or swing back, though my fist itched too. I just stared at Bria, waiting for her to take it back, to show me she still had my side. But she didn't. She doubled down, her voice sharper. "Cole, say you're sorry. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal? To her, maybe. To me, it was everything. That slap wasn't just about shoes. It was Gregory telling me I was less than him, and Bria telling me to swallow it. I didn't say a word. I turned around, my boots crunching on the gravel, and started walking down that mountain. The wind bit at my face, but I barely felt it. All I could feel was the heat of that moment, the weight of their eyes on my back. I didn't stop until I hit the base, where the rental car sat waiting. I drove straight to the airport, booked the first flight out of Montana, and left them all behind, Bria, Gregory, the whole damn circus. I wasn't running away. I wasn't weak. I was done pretending I belonged in a world that didn't respect me. Sitting on that plane, staring out at the clouds, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't the same man who'd climbed that mountain with him. That slap woke me up. It wasn't just about Gregory's hand or Bria's words. It was about me, about what I'd let myself become for her. I'd spent years building a life I was proud of, and in one smack, they tried to knock it down. But they didn't know me. They didn't know what I was capable of. As the plane hummed beneath me, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going back to being the guy who took it. I was going home to start something new, something they couldn't touch. That moment on the mountain wasn't the end of me, it was the beginning. I'd built my world once before, and I could do it again. Only this time, it'd be on my terms, not theirs. Gregory thought he'd put me in my place, and Bria thought I'd bend. They were wrong. I was Cole Mercer, and I was just getting started. Back home, I let the silence settle over me like a heavy coat, thick and suffocating, but somehow comforting too. The phone kept buzzing, Bria's name flashing first, then her mother Celeste, then some guy who said he was Gregory's assistant, all of them leaving messages I didn't bother to hear. I didn't want their voices in my head, not after what happened on that mountain. I could still feel the sting of Gregory's slap, the way it echoed in my skull, but worse was Bria's voice telling me to apologize, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I tossed the phone onto the couch and paced my living room, the hardwood creaking under my boots, trying to figure out what came next. I'd walked away from Montana from them, but walking away didn't erase the questions gnawing at me. Why had Bria sided with him? Why hadn't she stood up for me, her husband, the guy she'd promised to build a life with? I kept seeing her face up there, calm, cold, like she'd already checked out of us, and then I'd see Riker Hale, Gregory's golden boy, hovering around her like a shadow. I wasn't imagining it. There was something off about the way she looked at him, the way he smiled too easy when she was near. My gut twisted, telling me I wasn't crazy, that there was more to this than a pair of scuffed shoes and a bruised ego. I needed to know the truth, but I couldn't do it alone, not with my head spinning like this. So I picked up the phone, not to call Bria back, but to dial Talia Gwynn, my business partner and the one person I trusted more than anyone. She answered on the second ring, her voice steady and sharp like always. Cole, you okay? You sound like hell. I laughed, a dry, bitter sound, and told her everything, the hike, the slap, Bria's betrayal, the way I'd left them all standing there. She didn't interrupt, just listened, and when I was done, she said, we need to figure out what's really going on. You don't deserve this. That's why I called her. Talia didn't waste time with pity, she got to work. We met at my office that night, the city lights flickering outside the big windows, and spread out everything I had on the table, emails, texts, photos from the trip I'd barely looked at. Talia's eyes narrowed as she flipped through them, stopping on one of Bria and Riker laughing together at the lodge, his hand brushing her arm. This doesn't look like nothing, she said, and I nodded, my jaw tight. I didn't want to believe it, didn't want to think the woman I'd married could turn on me like that, but the evidence was piling up. Talia tapped her pen on the desk, thinking, then said, let's dig deeper. If they're hiding something personal or business, we'll find it. Business. That word hit me like a brick. Gregory owned half the real estate game, and Riker was his right hand, smooth, ambitious, the kind of guy who'd smile while he stabbed you. What if this wasn't just about me and Bria? What if it was bigger? I'd spent years building my firm, designing projects that mattered, and I'd shared some of those ideas with Bria back when we were solid. Had she fed them to her family? To Riker? The thought made my stomach churn, but I couldn't shake it. Talia saw the look on my face and leaned in. Cole, we've got this. Whatever they're up to, we'll figure it out. You're not alone. I nodded, grateful for her, and we started planning. She'd pull records, check into Langston Group's recent moves, see if anything tied back to me. I'd go through my own files, look for anything I might have missed. It felt good to do something, to take control instead of just stewing in the quiet. But as we worked, the silence from Bria started to feel different, not empty, but heavy, like the air before a storm rolls in. She wasn't calling anymore, and neither was Gregory. Were they regrouping? Plotting? Or did they think I'd just fade away? They didn't know me at all if they thought that. I wasn't fading. I was waking up. Talia and I stayed late, the clock ticking past midnight, and with every file we opened, every note we scribbled, I felt the ground firm up under me. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. It was about finding out who they really were and what they'd taken from me. I didn't know it then, but that night was the first step in a plan that would tear down everything they thought they controlled. The slap had started it, sure, but the silence afterward? That's where I found my strength. They thought they'd humiliated me, sent me running. They were wrong. I wasn't running from them. I was running towards something I'd build myself, piece by piece, until it was bigger than all of them combined. I was sitting at my desk, the city humming outside my office window, when Talia walked in with a stack of papers and a look that told me she'd found something big. She didn't waste time, just dropped the pile in front of me and said, Cole, you need to see this. I flipped through the first few pages, and there it was, a luxury resort I'd designed 3 years ago, back when Bria and I were still in that honeymoon glow, when I'd sit up late sketching ideas and she'd lean over my shoulder, smiling, telling me how brilliant I was. I'd pitched it to her one night over wine, a private dream project, all glass and timber curving into the cliffs, something I'd never shared with anyone else. Now here it was, stamped with Langston Group's logo, my name nowhere in sight. My heart sank, then started pounding, a mix of shock and anger I couldn't swallow down. Talia sat across from me, her voice low. They stole it. Cole, your work, your ideas. They took it and slapped their brand on it like you don't even exist. I couldn't speak for a minute, just stared at those blueprints, my blueprints, twisted into something I didn't recognize. It wasn't just theft, it was personal, a knife in the back from the woman I'd trusted with everything. But that wasn't all Talia had. She slid a folder across the desk, surveillance photos spilling out Bria and Riker Hale, caught in grainy black and white, meeting at some upscale bar, then again outside a hotel, late at night when she'd told me she was with her family. His hand on her elbow, her head tilted toward him, too close, too familiar. I felt sick, the kind of sick that starts in your gut and crawls up your throat, but I didn't let it show. Talia watched me, waiting, and I finally said, so it's true. All of it. She nodded. Looks that way. I'm sorry, Cole. I didn't want sorry. I wanted answers, proof, something I could hold onto while the world I'd built with Bria crumbled around me. Those photos confirmed what I'd been afraid to admit. She wasn't just drifting, she was gone, tangled up with Riker in ways that went beyond business. And the resort? That was Gregory's doing, I was sure of it, using my designs to pad his empire while his golden boy played house with my wife. I could have lost it right there, smashed something, screamed, let the rage take over, but I didn't. I took a deep breath, leaned back in my chair, and started thinking. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd play smarter. We need to protect what's mine, I told Talia, and she grinned, like she'd been waiting for me to say it. We got to work, moved money out of joint accounts, locked down my firm's assets, put every project I'd ever touched under a legal shield they couldn't crack. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was building a wall between me and them, brick by brick. Talia handled the tech side, securing files, while I called my lawyer, a quiet guy named Paul who'd never lost me a fight. I told him to draft divorce papers, nothing fancy, just the basics, irreconcilable differences, no contest, clean break. I didn't want Bria's money or her family's pity. I wanted out. When Paul asked if I was sure, I said, yeah, I'm sure. She picked her side. He didn't argue, just got it done. By the end of the day, I had the first draft in my inbox, a stack of papers that felt heavier than they should have. I printed them, signed my name at the bottom, and drove to the house, our house, though it didn't feel like mine anymore. Bria wasn't there, probably off with Riker or her father, plotting their next move. I left the papers on the kitchen counter, right where she'd see them. No note, no explanation. She'd know what they meant. Driving back to my apartment, I felt the weight lift just a little, not much, but enough to breathe. This wasn't about giving up. It was about taking control. Gregory thought he could slap me down, and Bria thought she could trade me in for something shinier, but they didn't get it. I wasn't some nobody they could erase. I built my life from scratch once, and I'd do it again, only this time, I'd make sure they felt it. Talia called as I pulled into my parking spot, her voice crackling through the speaker. You okay after all that? I told her I was, and I meant it. Good, she said, because this is just the start. If Gregory wants a war, he's got one. He just doesn't know it yet. I smiled for the first time in days, a real smile, not the fake one I'd worn on that mountain. She was right. They'd taken my designs, my trust, my marriage, but they'd also woken me up. I wasn't the guy who'd climbed up to Montana anymore, hoping to fit in. I was Cole Mercer, and I was done playing their game. Now it was my turn, and I'd hit them where it hurt most, not with fists, but with everything I'd learned about building something strong. They'd regret crossing me, not because I'd scream or fight dirty, but because I'd outlast them, outsmart them, and come out on top. I was in my apartment, staring at the divorce papers I'd left for Bria, when the door slammed open and she stormed in, her face red and her eyes blazing like I'd never seen before. She held those papers in her hand, crumpled at the edges, and threw them at me, shouting, "What the hell is this, Cole? You're abandoning me, abandoning us, over some stupid fight?" I stood up slow, keeping my voice steady, because I knew losing it now would just give her more to twist. "It's not a fight, Bria," I said. "It's everything, your father slapping me, you telling me to apologize, the way you've been sneaking around with Riker. I know what's going on." She froze for a second, like I'd caught her off guard, but then she flipped it right back, stepping closer, her voice sharp. "You're paranoid, Cole. You're making this into something it's not because you can't handle my family. You overreacted in Montana, and now you're throwing away our marriage over it." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because she thought she could talk her way out of this. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "I saw the photos, Bria. You and Riker, late nights, secret meetings. And my resort design? Your family stole it. Don't tell me I'm imagining that." Her mouth opened, then shut, and I could see the wheels turning, trying to find a lie that'd stick, but I didn't give her the chance. "I'm done," I told her. "Done with the games, done with you picking them over me. Sign the papers, or don't. I'm not changing my mind." She switched tactics then, her voice dropping low, almost pleading. "You're going to regret this, Cole. My father's lawyers will bury you. He'll destroy everything you've built." I stepped closer, not backing down, and said, "Let him try. I've got nothing left to lose, Bria. You made sure of that." She glared at me, her hands shaking, then turned and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. I stood there, breathing hard, feeling the quiet settle back in, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of quiet that comes before a fight gets ugly. I knew she'd run to Gregory, and he'd come at me with everything he had, but I wasn't scared. I was ready. I'd already called Talia that morning, told her about the divorce papers, and she'd been digging deeper into Riker Hale's mess. She'd found something: doctor documents, shell companies, shady deals he'd pushed through under Langston Group's name. "This guy's dirty, Cole," she'd said over the phone, "and I've got enough to make him sweat." I told her to keep it quiet for now, because I had another move in mind. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd gotten from an old contact, an ethics official with the real estate licensing board, a woman named Linda Voss who didn't mess around. I'd met her years ago at a conference, back when I was still climbing, and she'd liked my straight shooter style. I told her about Riker, kept it simple: suspicious permits, stolen designs, a pattern of corner cutting that stank of fraud. "I've got proof," I said, "and I'll send it over if you're interested." She was interested. "Send it," she said, "and if it checks out, Hale's license is toast." I hung up, feeling a spark of something. Hope, maybe, or just the thrill of hitting back. Talia came over that night, her laptop glowing as she showed me what she'd pulled: emails between Riker and some lowlife contractor, fake signatures on environmental reports, a whole web of lies that could sink him. "This isn't just about you anymore," she said. "It's about taking them all down." I nodded, because she was right. I'd started this to protect myself, but now it was bigger. I sent Linda the files, every damning piece we had, and then I waited. Bria's threats echoed in my head, but they didn't shake me. Gregory could send his lawyers, his money, his power, but I had something he didn't: truth, and people who'd listen. I poured myself a coffee, sat on my couch, and thought about how it had all gone wrong. I'd loved Bria once, really loved her, the way you love someone when you think they see you for who you are. But she hadn't. She'd seen me as a stepping stone, a tool for her family's machine, and when I wouldn't bend, she'd pick them. That hurt more than the slap, more than the theft, but it also lit a fire in me. I wasn't the guy who'd stood there on that mountain, stunned and silent. I was moving now, striking back, and it felt good. Talia looked at me across the room, her eyes steady, and said, "You sure you're ready for what comes next?" I took a sip of my coffee, the bitterness sharp on my tongue, and said, "Yeah, I'm ready. We're not reacting anymore. We're calling the shots." She smiled, a fierce little grin, and I knew we were in this together. Bria thought she'd scared me off, and Gregory thought he could crush me, but they didn't get it. I wasn't running. I was building something new, not a marriage, not a firm, but a fight. And I'd make sure they felt every blow. I was pouring my morning coffee, the steam curling up from the mug, when the first article dropped online, big bold letters screaming across my phone screen: Riker Hale, Langston Group star, under investigation for licensing fraud. I stood there in my kitchen, staring at it, feeling a rush that wasn't quite victory, but something close, like the first crack in a dam about to burst. Talia had texted me the link with a single word: boom, and I knew she was grinning somewhere, proud of the bomb we'd set off. It had been a week since I'd sent those files to Linda Voss at the licensing board, and she'd moved fast, digging into Riker's shady deals with the kind of speed that told me she'd been waiting for a chance to nail someone like him. The article laid it out: falsified permits, questionable land grabs, my stolen resort design tied to a shell company he'd buried under layers of paperwork. My name wasn't in it. Not yet. But I didn't care about credit. I cared about the chaos it'd cause. Gregory's reaction didn't take long. My office phone started ringing off the hook that afternoon, his voice blasting through the voicemail. "Mercer, you little punk, you think you can mess with me? I'll ruin you, your firm, your life, everything." I didn't pick up. I hit record instead, letting every threat pile up like ammunition. He called 3 more times, each message uglier than the last, promising lawsuits, blacklists, even hinting he'd make it personal. I saved them all, sent them to Talia, and told her, "He's losing it." "This is good." She laughed over the phone. "Good? It's perfect. He's scared, Cole." Scared or not, Gregory wasn't the type to back down. He'd swing harder now, and I had to be ready. That's when Sophie Armand reached out. I'd never met her before, but she emailed me late that night, subject line: "I work for Langston. I can help." I opened it, skeptical, but her words pulled me in. She'd been an assistant in their legal department, quiet and overlooked, until she'd started noticing things: forged permits, emails about cutting corners, memos where Gregory bragged about handling problems. She'd kept copies, stashed them on a drive after she quit, scared but angry. I saw what they did to people, she wrote. And when I read about Riker today, I knew it was time. I called her right away, my voice calm even though my pulse was racing. Sophie, you sure about this? I asked. She didn't hesitate. Yeah, I'm sure. They think they're untouchable. I want them to pay. I liked her already, straightforward, no nonsense, like Talia. She sent me the files, a gold mine of dirt. Internal chats where Gregory greenlit illegal shortcuts, photos of Riker schmoozing regulators, even a note about keeping the Mercer problem quiet. That last one hit me hard. Proof they'd targeted me, not just my work. I told Sophie, you're in this now, and they'll come after you. I'll protect you, whatever it takes. She said, I trust you. And I meant it when I promised her safety. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone they'd stepped on, everyone they'd silenced. I forwarded everything to Linda Voss, CC'd my lawyer Paul, and sat back, letting it sink in. Gregory's empire was built on marble and money, but underneath? Rot, pure and simple. I could still hear his voice from those voicemails, all bluster and rage, calling me a nobody, a bug he'd squash. But I wasn't the nobody here. I'd been the quiet one, the guy who took the slap and walked away, and now I was the one with the microphone, amplifying every lie they'd told. Talia came over that night, her eyes bright with the kind of fire I hadn't seen since we started the firm together. We spread Sophie's files across my table, piecing it all together, dates, names, deals that'd bury them. This is bigger than we thought, she said. Environmental violations, bribery, the works. Gregory's not just a bully, he's a criminal. I nodded, running my hand through my hair, feeling the weight of it. Yeah, and we're the ones who'll prove it. She looked at me, serious now, and asked, you okay with where this is going? Once it's out, there's no stopping it. I thought about Bria for a second, her face when she'd thrown those divorce papers at me, her threats about her father's power, but I pushed it aside. I'm more than okay, I told Talia. This isn't revenge. It's justice. She smirked, little bit of both, maybe. I didn't argue, because she wasn't wrong. I wanted Gregory to feel this, to watch his world shake, the way mine had when he'd slapped me in front of everyone. But it was more than that now. Sophie's files, Linda's investigation, Talia's grit. It was a machine I'd started, and it was rolling toward them fast. I poured us both a drink, just water because we needed clear heads, and raised my glass. To the rot, I said, and to tearing it out. Talia clinked hers against mine. To the rot. We drank, and I felt it, the shift. I wasn't hiding anymore, wasn't licking my wounds. Gregory thought he'd humiliated me, but he'd just handed me the match. Now I'd light the fire. I was at my parents' house, sitting on their old porch swing, when my mom called me inside, her voice tight and shaky in a way I'd never heard before. Cole, it's your dad, she said, and my stomach dropped as I followed her into the living room where the TV was blaring local news. A car crash, a mangled pickup truck, my dad's truck, T-boned by a Langston Group delivery rig on some back road near their farm. The reporter said Eli Mercer was in the hospital, critical but stable, and the driver claimed it was an accident, just a slippery road and bad timing. I stood there, frozen, watching the screen flash pictures of the wreck. My dad's truck crumpled like a tin can, and all I could think was this wasn't random, not after everything I'd stirred up. Mom grabbed my arm, tears in her eyes, asking, why would this happen, Cole? He was just going to town for feed. I didn't have an answer, not one I could say out loud, but my mind was racing, connecting dots I didn't want to see. Gregory's threats from those voicemails echoed in my head. I'll ruin your life, everything. And now my dad was lying in a hospital bed, tubes and machines keeping him alive. I hugged Mom, told her I'd handle it, and drove straight to the police station, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The cops were polite but skeptical when I said, this wasn't an accident. Check the driver, check Langston Group. They asked for proof, so I handed over the recordings of Gregory's calls, the venom in his voice clear as day, and told them about the investigation, Riker's fraud, the way they'd been coming after me. He said he'd make it personal. I told the officer, a guy with tired eyes named Martinez. This is personal. He listened, nodded, and said they'd look into it, but I could tell he wasn't sold. Not yet. I left the station and called Talia, my voice shaking as I filled her in. They hit my dad, I said, and she went quiet for a second before replying. We'll get them, Cole. I promise. I filed for a restraining order against Gregory that afternoon, citing the threats and the crash, and hired a security guy to watch my parents' place. Some ex-cop Talia knew who didn't ask too many questions. I wasn't taking chances anymore. Then, out of nowhere, Riker Hale showed up at my apartment that night, banging on the door like a trapped animal. I opened it, ready for a fight, but he looked wrecked, pale, sweaty, eyes darting like he hadn't slept in days. We need to talk, he said, pushing past me before I could stop him. I crossed my arms, staring him down, and said, You've got 5 minutes. He paced my living room, rambling about the investigation, how it was ruining him, how Gregory was losing his mind in the fallout. He's the one you want, Riker said, not me. I just followed orders. I didn't buy his victim act, but I let him keep talking, and then he dropped it. The crash, it wasn't an accident. Gregory told me to send you a message, something to shut you up. I didn't know he'd go that far. My blood went cold, but I kept my face blank, reaching for my phone on the counter and hitting record without him noticing. Say that again, I told him, my voice low. He did, spilling it all. Dates, calls, how Gregory had picked the driver, a guy with a rap sheet who'd do anything for cash. I stood there, listening to this snake unravel, and felt something snap inside me. Not fear, not even anger, just a hard, clear focus. Get out, I said when he was done, and he stumbled to the door, muttering, You don't know what he'll do next. I locked it behind him, played the recording back, and sent it to Martinez and Linda Voss with a note. This is what they're capable of. The next day, the state opened a formal inquiry into Langston Group. Not just fraud now, but conspiracy, maybe worse. I sat by my dad's hospital bed that night, his hand limp in mine, the beep of the monitor steady but weak. He'd always been the strong one, the guy who taught me how to swing a hammer, how to stand up when life knocked you down. Now he was here because of me, because I'd pushed Gregory too far. I whispered, I'm sorry, Dad, but I didn't mean I'd stop. I meant I'd finish it. Riker's confession was the final piece, the key to locking Gregory up, and I'd use it. Talia called as I left the hospital, her voice sharp. The inquiry's moving fast. They're pulling records, talking to the driver. You did it, Cole. I didn't feel like celebrating. Not yet, I said. Not till he's behind bars. She paused, then said, Your dad's tough. He'll pull through, and we'll make them pay. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and hung up. Standing in the parking lot, the night air cold against my face, I realized this was it. The storm I'd been building since that slap on the mountain. It wasn't mine to dodge anymore. It was mine to steer. Gregory had crossed a line he couldn't uncross, and I'd make sure it buried him. I was in my apartment, the TV on mute, when the news broke. Gregory Langston arrested, hauled out of his glass tower office in handcuffs, his face twisted in a snarl as cameras flashed around him. The charges rolled across the screen like a list I'd written myself. Fraud, conspiracy, intellectual property theft, and the big one, conspiracy to commit bodily harm, tied straight to my dad's crash. I sat there on my couch, coffee going cold in my hands, watching it all unfold, the empire I'd chipped away at finally cracking open for the world to see. The press conference came next, some state official in a stiff suit laying it out. Years of cooked books, stolen designs, a hit ordered on a man who dared to fight back. That man was me, but I didn't feel like a hero. I felt empty, like I'd been running on fumes and just hit the finish line with nothing left to give. My phone buzzed, Bria's name lighting up the screen, and I let it ring, watching it vibrate across the table until it stopped. She called twice already that day, left a voicemail I didn't play, because what could she say now? Sorry? It's over? I didn't need her words. I'd heard enough when she'd picked her father over me. The arrest footage looped again. Gregory's tailored suit wrinkled as they shoved him into a cop car. And I thought back to that slap in Montana, the way his hand had stung my cheek, the way he'd smirked like I was nothing. He wasn't smirking now. Talia texted me, You watching this? We did it. And I typed back, Yeah, we did. But it didn't feel like a win. Not yet. My dad was still in the hospital, breathing through tubes, and I couldn't shake the guilt that I'd dragged him into this mess. I drove to see him that afternoon, the hospital halls quiet except for the hum of machines, and sat by his bed, watching his chest rise and fall. He'd said something to me once, years ago, when I was a kid upset about some bully at school. You can burn the house down, son, but what will you live in after? I'd laughed it off then, but now it stuck with me, heavy and real. I'd burn Gregory's house down, sure, his money, his power, his name, but what was I left with? A busted marriage, a dad fighting to wake up, a firm I'd locked down so tight it barely felt like mine anymore. I squeezed his hand, rough and calloused from years of work, and whispered, I got him, Dad. He's done. No answer, just the beep of the monitor, but I hoped he heard me somewhere in there. Back home, I paced my living room, the TV still flickering with updates, Langston Group stocks tanking, Riker turning state's evidence, the whole machine grinding to a halt. Sophie called, her voice steady but excited. They're raiding the offices, Cole. Everything I gave you, it's all coming out. I thanked her, told her she'd been brave, and meant it. She'd risked a lot, more than I'd asked, and now the rot was spilling into the open. Talia showed up later, a bottle of beer in each hand, and plopped down on my couch like she owned the place. To justice, she said, handing me one, and I clinked it against hers, taking a long sip. Feels weird, doesn't it? She asked, and I nodded, because she got it. This hollow space where hate used to be. I'd spent months burning for this, plotting every move, and now that Gregory was in a cell, I didn't know what to feel. It's not enough, I said finally, staring at the bottle in my hand. Taking him down, it doesn't fix Dad, doesn't bring Bria back, doesn't undo what they did. Talia leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Maybe it's not about fixing, Cole. Maybe it's about clearing the ground so you can build something new. I let that sink in, rolling it around in my head like a blueprint taking shape. She was right. I'd torn it all apart, but tearing down wasn't the end. I'd always been a builder, not a destroyer, and sitting there, watching Gregory's world collapse, I realized I needed more than this. I needed to make something better, something that'd outlast his greed and my anger. What's next then? Talia asked, like she knew I was already turning it over. I took another sip, the beer cold against my lips, and said, we use this. The mess they left, we turn it into something good. She grinned. That's the Cole I know. We stayed up late, talking it through, not revenge anymore, but a plan, a way to take the wreckage and shape it into something solid. Bria called again as Talia left, and I let it ring again, the sound fading into the quiet. I didn't hate her, didn't hate Gregory, didn't even hate Riker. I just didn't care anymore. They'd lost, and I'd won, but winning wasn't the point. It was what I did next that mattered. I went to bed that night, the first time in weeks I didn't dream of that mountain, and woke up knowing the storm was over. Now it was time to build. I stood in my office, staring out at the city skyline, when the idea hit me, not like a lightning bolt, but slow and steady, like water carving a path through stone. Gregory was locked up, Langston Group was crumbling, and all those big, shiny projects they'd started, towers, resorts, gated communities, were sitting half-built, abandoned in the fallout. I could have let them rot, let the weeds take over and call it justice, but that didn't sit right with me. I'd spent my life building things, not watching them fall apart, and Talia's words from the night before kept rattling around in my head. Clear the ground, make something new. So I picked up the phone and called her, my voice steady as I said, what if we took those failed projects and turned them around? Not for profit, for people. She didn't miss a beat. I'm in. Let's do it. That's how Renewal Urban Development started, not a company, but a nonprofit, something I could pour myself into without the stink of Gregory's greed. We got to work fast, pooling what was left of my firm's resources, calling in favors, buying up those stalled Langston sites for pennies because no one else wanted the mess. I wasn't trying to be some big-shot mogul. I just wanted to fix what they'd broken, turn their waste into something real, mixed-income housing, green spaces, places where people could live, not just show off. Talia took charge of operations, her sharp mind cutting through red tape like a blade, while I sketched designs late into the night, imagining families in those spaces, kids playing, folks who'd never had a shot at a decent home finally getting one. Sophie Armand signed on too, surprising me with an email one morning. I want in. I know their dirty tricks. Let me keep this clean. I made her our ethics officer, because if anyone could spot the rot before it spread, it was her. We were a small team, but we moved like we had nothing to lose, because we didn't, not anymore. My dad was out of the hospital by then, slow to walk but quick to smile, and when I told him what we were doing, he clapped me on the shoulder and said, that's my boy, building something that lasts. His pride stuck with me, a quiet fuel that kept me going. Then Bria reached out, a letter in my mailbox, no call this time, she'd moved to Seattle, started working with housing advocates up there, and wrote, "I'm sorry, Cole. Not just for Dad, for all of it. I was wrong." It wasn't a big apology, no tears or begging, just her words on paper, simple and raw. I sat with it for a day, turning it over, and wrote back, "I accept it. We're done, but I hope you're doing good." I mailed it and let it go, not forgetting, not forgiving everything, but moving on. Some endings you need to close tight, like a door you don't plan to reopen, and that's what I did with her. The first project kicked off a month later, a half-finished Langston Tower we gutted and rebuilt into apartments, affordable but solid, with a community garden on the roof and a clinic downstairs. I walked the site every day, boots crunching on gravel, talking to workers, tweaking plans, feeling the weight of it settle into something good. Talia handled the numbers, making sure we stretched every dollar, while Sophie double-checked permits, her quiet focus keeping us above board. We weren't perfect. Delays happened. Costs crept up, but we pushed through. And when the first tenants moved in, I stood there watching, a knot in my throat I didn't expect. A single mom with 2 kids hugged me, saying, "This is ours now, thank you." And I just nodded, because words didn't fit. This wasn't about me, it was about them, about taking what Gregory had hoarded and giving it back. I thought about him sometimes, rotting in a cell, and wondered if he'd ever see this, his legacy flipped upside down, not a monument to his name, but a lifeline for people he'd never have looked at twice. It didn't make me happy, not exactly, but it made me feel right, like I'd found my footing after months of sliding. Talia caught me staring at the building one evening, the sun dipping low, and said, "You're smiling, Cole. Been a while since I've seen that." I shrugged. "Feels different, doesn't it? Doing this instead of fighting." She nodded. "Yeah, it's better." And it was better than the anger, better than the hollow wind of Gregory's arrest. I'd lost a lot. My marriage, my trust, damn near my dad, but I'd gained this, a chance to build something that mattered. Bria's letter came back to me as I drove home that night, her apology sitting lighter now, and I realized I didn't need her to hurt anymore. She'd made her choices, and I'd made mine. I pulled into my parking spot, the city quiet around me, and felt the shift. I wasn't just surviving the storm anymore. I was planting roots in the wreckage. Renewal wasn't just the name of our nonprofit. It was what I was chasing, step by step, brick by brick. I stood in front of Unity Square, the sun warm on my face, watching kids chase each other across the courtyard while their parents unpacked boxes into the apartments above, apartments I designed, built from the bones of what used to be Langston Tower. Gregory's gaudy dream of wealth and exclusion. It had been a year since his arrest, a year since I'd decided to stop tearing down and start building up, and now here it was, a community where nurses, teachers, single moms, and immigrant shop owners could live without breaking their backs to pay rent. I'd renamed it Unity Square because that's what it was, a place that pulled people together, not pushed them apart. The old steel frame was still there, but we'd stripped out the marble and mirrors, replaced them with practical spaces, a clinic on the ground floor, an art center for kids, rooftop gardens where folks were already planting tomatoes and herbs. I walked through it that morning, my boots scuffing the fresh pavement, and stopped to talk to a woman named Maria, a nurse who just moved in with her son. "This place, it's a fresh start," she said, her eyes bright, and I nodded, feeling a tightness in my chest I couldn't shake. "Glad you're here," I told her, and meant it, because every face I saw was a reason this mattered. Talia was there too, clipboard in hand, barking orders at the last of the construction crew, her voice cutting through the chatter like she was born to run this. She'd been the backbone of Renewal Urban Development, turning my late-night sketches into reality, and when she caught me watching, she grinned, "You're getting soft, Cole, look at you, all proud." I laughed, maybe a little, because she wasn't wrong. I was proud, not of myself, but of what we'd done. Sophie was there too, quieter, checking paperwork with a tenant, making sure every I was dotted, every rule followed. She'd kept us clean, kept us honest, and when I thanked her later, she just shrugged. Someone had to make sure this wasn't another Langston mess. I thought about that, how far we'd come from Gregory's world of lies and shortcuts. The scars were still there, carved into me from that slap on the mountain, from Bria's betrayal, from my dad's crash, but standing in Unity Square, I saw them differently. They weren't just wounds anymore. They were lines on a blueprint, guiding me to this. I climbed up to the rooftop later, the city sprawling out below, and leaned on the railing, breathing in the smell of fresh dirt from the gardens. A guy named Ahmed, who'd opened a falafel stand downstairs, waved me over and handed me a plate. For you. First customer, no charge. I took it, the food warm in my hands, and sat with him, listening as he told me about moving here from Syria, starting over with nothing but his recipes and his wife's stubborn hope. This place gave us a chance, he said, and I nodded, because that's what I'd wanted. Not a monument to my name, but a foundation for theirs. Back on the ground, I ran into my dad, who'd insisted on coming despite the cane he still leaned on. He looked up at the building, squinting against the sun, and said, "You turned their trash into treasure, son. I always knew you could build anything." I hugged him, careful of his still healing ribs, and felt the weight of his words settle deep. He was right. I'd always built things, from tree houses as a kid to skyscrapers as a man, but this was different. This wasn't about me proving something to Gregory or Bria, or even myself. It was about the people walking through those doors, the lives starting fresh inside those walls. Talia found me later, as the crowd thinned out, and handed me a coffee. "Big day, huh? You holding up?" I took a sip, the bitterness grounding me, and said, "Yeah, just taking it in. Feels real now." She nodded. "It is real. And it's only the start. 3 more projects in the pipeline, all greenlit." I smiled, because she was right. We weren't stopping here. Renewal was growing, spreading to other cities, other forgotten lots, and I was ready to keep going. The emotional scars still ached sometimes. Nights when I'd wake up hearing Bria's voice, or days when I'd see my dad wince and remember why. But they didn't own me anymore. I'd turn them into something else, something tangible, like the concrete under my feet or the glass catching the sunlight above. As the sun dipped low, I walked the perimeter alone, running my hand along the brick, thinking about how it had all started. A slap, a betrayal, a fall. Those moments had nearly broken me, but they'd also pushed me here, to this square, this community, this legacy. I stopped at the entrance, where we'd carved Unity Square into a stone plaque and traced the letters with my fingers. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was mine, ours, a piece of the future I'd chosen to shape. I headed home that night, the city lights blurring past my windshield, and felt lighter than I had in years, not healed, not whole, but steady. This was restoration, not just for the land, but for me. I was sorting through mail in my apartment, the morning light slanting through the blinds, when I found it, a letter from Gregory Langston, postmarked from the state prison, his handwriting shaky but sharp on the envelope. I held it for a minute, turning it over in my hands, feeling the weight of everything it could say: threats, apologies, excuses. I didn't open it. I tossed it into a drawer and shut it tight, because I didn't need his words. I'd heard enough from him on that mountain, and those voicemails, in the wreckage of my dad's truck. He'd taken his shot at me, tried to push me off the edge, and I'd climbed back up, not just to survive, but to stand taller than he ever had. I grabbed my coffee and headed out, driving to Unity Square, where the air smelled like fresh paint and blooming gardens, a far cry from the sterile marble of Langston Tower it used to be. I walked the grounds, nodding at tenants, Maria the nurse waving from the clinic, Ahmed flipping falafel at his stand, and felt the hum of life around me, a rhythm I'd helped create. This was my answer to Gregory, not a letter or a courtroom fight, but steel and glass and green, rising from the ashes of his arrogance. Talia met me there, her tablet glowing with updates on our next project, a stalled Langston resort we were turning into a community center, and said, "You see the numbers? We're ahead of schedule." I grinned. "Good. Let's keep it that way." She smirked. "You're getting bossy, Cole?" And I laughed, because maybe I was, but it felt right, leading this, shaping it, watching it grow. Sophie was there too, going over permits with a quiet focus, and when I thanked her for keeping us straight, she just nodded. "It's what I do." We were a team, a small one, but solid, and together we'd turned the mess Gregory left into something he'd never understand, a place for people, not power. I thought about that slap sometimes, the way it had stung my cheek and my pride, how it had started this whole climb, and I didn't flinch anymore. It was just a chapter, one I'd closed, like Bria's betrayal or Riker's cowardice, moments that hurt but didn't define me. My dad came by later, leaning on his cane less these days, and we sat on a bench in the courtyard, watching kids kick a ball around. "You did good, son," he said, his voice rough but warm, and I felt that old pride swell up, the kind he'd always given me when I built something with my hands. "Thanks, Dad," I said, Couldn't have done it without you. He chuckled. Sure you could have. You're stubborn as hell. Maybe he was right, but his strength, his fight to recover, had kept me going when I'd wanted to quit. I didn't tell him about Gregory's letter. Didn't need to. He'd see it in what I'd built here, in the families moving in, the green spreading across the rooftops. This wasn't the end I pictured back on that mountain, when I'd walked away from Bria and her family, but it was better, not a finish line, but a new start. I drove home that night, the city lights steady around me, and thought about what came next, not lawsuits or revenge, but more projects, more communities, more chances to prove something. My name is Cole Mercer, and I build things, I always have, from the ground up, with nothing but grit and a plan. That slap had tried to tell me I was less than a pair of fancy shoes, but I'd turned it around, made it the spark for something bigger. I wasn't fighting anymore, wasn't proving myself to anyone. I was creating, for the people who'd been told they weren't enough, the ones Gregory and his kind had stepped on to climb higher. Unity Square was just the beginning. We had sites lined up across the state, old Langston failures we'd resurrect into homes and parks and hope. Talia called as I pulled into my parking spot, her voice crackling through the speaker. You ready for tomorrow? Groundbreaking's at 8. I said, yeah, I'll be there, and hung up, stepping out into the cool night air. I looked up at the sky, clear and wide, and felt the quiet settle over me, not the heavy silence after Montana, but a calm I'd earned. The letter stayed in the drawer, unopened, because Gregory didn't get a say in this story anymore. He'd lost, not just in court, but in every way that mattered. His dynasty was dust, and I was still standing, building cities no one could put a price on. I unlocked my door, kicked off my boots, and sat on the couch, the weight of the day sinking in. It wasn't about the fall anymore, or the betrayal, or the crash. It was about the climb, the view from the top, the one I'd made myself. I'd taken their shots, felt the bruises, and kept going, not for them, but for me, for my dad, for the people who'd call these places home. This was my ending, the one I chose, written in concrete and steel, and laughter echoing through Unity Square, and the green stretching toward the sky. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let it all go, the anger, the hurt, the past, because tomorrow, I'd build again, and that's what I do best.